Welcome to the House of Hypertrophy. When thinking about the most important variables for muscle growth, there's a strong case to be made that how close to failure you train is up there. Simply put, getting to or very close to failure ensures you maximize muscle fiber recruitment and tension, which are likely crucial for maximizing hypertrophy. The recommendation to train with 2 or fewer reps away from failure is definitely solid. However, what if some of your sets are a bit further from failure? Does it hurt, help, or have a neutral effect on growth? A brand new study on trained individuals has explored this. It is actually the first study comparing varying proximities to failure to training with a fixed proximity to failure for muscle growth. Let's dive in. "31 trained individuals with 2 to 9 years of experience were recruited. They trained with this upper-lower program. There were 2 4-week blocks. One group aimed to leave 1 rep in reserve every single set. The second group varied in how close to failure they trained across the program. During both 4-week blocks, they aimed to leave 4 reps in reserve on all sets in the first week, 3 reps in reserve on all sets in the second week, 2 reps in reserve on all sets in the third week, and 1 rep in reserve on all sets in the final week. There was a deload in between the 2 4-week blocks and at the end of the last block, where frequency and volume were halved and all sets were performed with 1 rep in reserve. Some may be thinking, how can we be sure the subjects were reasonably accurate in estimating their reps in reserve? The researchers tested it. They had subjects perform repetitions to failure on the back squat and bench press with an 80% 1 rep max load. During both, the subjects shouted out when they thought they had 3 reps left as well as 1 rep left, before continuing on with reps to failure to see how accurate they were. So there were 4 measurements here. The subjects were fairly accurate, with the largest average error being -1.5 with their 3 rep in reserve estimation on the squat. This means that if a subject shouted out they had 3 reps left, they actually went on to perform 4.5 more reps. All the other estimations had lower average errors. The researchers did retest this after the study, and it was nice to see there were average numerical improvements for both groups. The largest average error was now around -1, and there was virtually no average error with a few other measures. Moving on to the main findings. Cross-sectional area of the vastus lateralis and thickness of the triceps were assessed, and it was found there was no significant differences in growth between both groups. Fascinatingly, triceps growth does lean towards the varied group. 1 rep max on the bench press and squat were also assessed, and there was also no significant difference in strength gains between groups. This time though, for the men, the bench press gains favor the fixed group. Overall, this was a pretty cool study. Taken at face value, the findings suggest having a portion of your training further from failure may be perfectly fine. But, in the spirit of scientific accuracy, there are some important things to keep in mind. The study did not have another group training to failure, so in the strictest sense we don't know how that could have fared. Although, if other research suggests no difference between leaving 1 rep in reserve and training to failure, we could infer that a group training to failure would not have seen superior gains. We'll summarize the research on training to failure shortly. The study was only partly supervised. The researchers fully supervised just the 4th week of training, with the subjects unsupervised in all other weeks. To the researchers' credit, they had subjects fill out extensive weekly training logs and film a set on the bench press and squat twice. We know subjects were on average fairly accurate in estimating their reps in reserve. However, if we look at the individual data points, we can see some deviated from the average a fair bit. Also, remember these tests were just done on the bench press and squat, but there were multiple other exercises in their program, so we can't be certain how accurate they were on them. It wouldn't surprise me if estimation accuracy was a little worse on the Bulgarian split squat, but virtually perfect with something like an incline dumbbell curl. Finally, we mustn't forget this is just one study with a small sample size, so these results are far from strong evidence. This is also why I'm not reading too much into the triceps growth favoring the varied group or the men's bench press measures favoring the fixed group. Before discussing this new paper further, let's quickly summarize the overall literature on failure for size and strength. For muscle growth, When considering the collective research and the details of some well-designed individual papers, my current view is that if you're training with low volumes, training to failure might be superior. Whereas if you're training with moderate to higher volumes, which are generally superior for growth anyway, training with 1 to 2 reps in reserve is likely sufficient. For strength, things are a little different. Proximity to failure has a much lower impact. Training much further from failure seems to be perfectly fine for getting stronger. There are nuances here that I could expand on in a future video if you like. Let me know how many of you are interested in the research on strength gains and how it may compare to training for exclusively size. Returning to the new study, we know it suggests that as long as you have some sets very close to failure, having some other sets a little further from failure may be fine. So, does that mean you should right now go ahead and include 3 or 4 reps in reserve sets in your program? If your primary goal is strength, I think it's indeed perfectly fine for you to have sets further from failure since, as just alluded to, there's enough overall evidence demonstrating that strength gains are not impaired when training further from failure. If your primary goal is muscle growth, I think you can definitely experiment with this if it's appealing to you and see how you get along. But I will say I currently don't have a large degree of confidence in this for growth since we're just dealing with one study on a small sample. So for now, I think the safer bet is still to have all sets in the 0 to 2 reps in reserve range for muscle growth, and this will remain as my default recommendation. But again, you're always free to explore around, and there are certain scenarios where I think having some sets a little further from failure could lend itself well. For example, the evidence is still developing, but there is some evidence that very high volumes could have benefits for growth. So if you're someone who's experimenting around with very high volumes, even if that's just with muscle group specialization where you just train 1 or 2 muscle groups with very high volumes, it is going to be more manageable to have a portion of those sets a little further from failure, at least initially when you're progressing and acclimatizing yourself to the higher volume. And then you can see if you want to maintain those sets further from failure or push them closer to failure. Finally, some days you may have limited energy. On days like these, you may find it more manageable to just train a bit further from failure than normal as opposed to skipping the workout entirely. These early results may give you a little more comfort in doing this occasionally. If you're searching for further guidance on programming to obtain your goal physique, our high-quality partner, the Alpha Progression app, can generate personalized programs that are truly comprehensive and well-rounded. Input key details, such as what equipment you have, how often and how long you're able to train, and if you want to emphasize certain muscles. This generally takes less than a minute. The training philosophy is based on the latest scientific literature, and further customizations can easily be done, like changing any training variable or implementing things like supersets. During workouts, there's a built-in warm-up set calculator and rest interval timer. The app also provides progressive overload recommendations to assist you. Of course, the app can automatically log your progression across time. If you're unsure about exercise technique, there are straightforward video and text instructions on nearly 800 exercises. The reviews from tens of thousands is a testament to its exceptional quality, but we would love to know what you think. The link in the comments and description gives you a free 2-week trial of all its features, plus 20% off a subscription if you decide to continue. Thank you for making it to the end. Feel free to check out another one of the videos at the House of Hypertrophy.